Now, firefighters in Greece say they're doing what is humanly possible to contain raging wildfires. But the situation on the country's second largest island, Evia, is still far from under control. Locals are being joined by firefighters from across Europe and elsewhere. They're doing what they can to tame the fires. But those affected by the blazes have begun criticizing their government, saying it could have done more to stop the destruction. Well, let's hear about the situation on the ground from our correspondents who are following the fires there. DW's Barbara Basil is on the Greek island of Evia, and Yulia Han is on Turkey's Aegean coast. Welcome to you both. Barbara, let's start with you. What's the situation on the island where you are today?
The large part of the north of Evia is burned. This is just one of the million of pine trees that have been razed to the ground here. And it is a scene of complete devastation. The fires are not yet completely under control because the forest floor is so hot. And we have 40 degrees again out here, that any slightest movement of wind or whatever, just a spark jumping, reignites them. So the firefighters are still out there in the interior on the steep hills of this island and putting out individual fires. And we see helicopters sort of circling around and trying to figure out new outbreaks and extinguish them as quickly as they can. But large parts of this virgin, formerly beautiful forest are completely dead and scarred and charred. It looks like a moonscape. People have lost their livelihoods, as we have heard, and there is indeed a very sad and a very angry mood.
Yulia, Turkey has suffered numerous wildfires so far. You've been covering them. Have authorities managed to get those under control?
Well, 2 weeks after the first blazes erupted here in Turkey, the situation finally appears to be under control, although firefighting operations continue in at least one location here in the province of Mugla, according to authorities. But many are warning that it is still too early to give the all clear because the conditions that have fueled the fires in recent days haven't changed. It's still very hot, very dry and very windy. Now, the wildfires here in Turkey are said to be the worst in decades. They have left so much destruction. At least 8 people were killed and tens of thousands had to leave their homes. The flames have turned huge tracts of forests and fields into grey landscapes. According to the latest estimates, a total of about 150,000 hectares of land has been destroyed nationwide, an area roughly 2 times the size of New York City, just to give you an image, an idea of the extent of the damage.
Barbara, the Greek Prime Minister has offered what sounds like an apology. He's promised compensation for those affected by the fires. Is the government acknowledging that it didn't prepare for this properly?
Not openly and not really. This sort of halfway apology that we heard the day before yesterday was just meant to sort of calm down nerves, to tell people I'm at your sides. But the government had put out a forest protection plan in June this year. And of course, nothing so far, nothing at all had been implemented. Thousands of new policemen were employed in Greece, but the country has only 4,000 firefighters overall for the whole country. And again, here we saw about the same amount of devastation as in Turkey, with around 150,000 acres of forests and fields having been burned. So yes, they didn't take the threat seriously, even though it burns here every summer. They totally underestimated the consequences of climate change, and now they're sort of scrabbling to make good. But it's going to take a lot to get people back on their side, and there is a tremendous anger here in the villages. People are just furious when you even mention the government.
Anger there in Turkey. Well, in Greece, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Yulia, also made promises of compensation to the victims there. Is the government ready to introduce tough measures to avoid situations like this in the future?
Well, the severity and the destructiveness of the wildfires here in Turkey are putting pressure on President Erdogan and his government to act. They are facing fierce criticism over what many view as a lack of preparedness, but also the calls for more climate action are growing louder because Turkey is facing increasingly frequent disasters. Experts link to climate change, not just forest fires, but also droughts, flash floods, or the so-called cease-not plague in the Sea of Marmaris. But climate change hasn't really been a political priority here in the country. Turkey remains one of only 6 nations that haven't yet ratified the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change. Now, President Erdogan is not a climate change denier, and his government has put forward action plans, but experts say that is simply not enough. The government has to start taking the causes and effects of global warming much more seriously.
Julia, thank you very much. That was our correspondent Julia Hahn there reporting from Turkey and on the Greek island of Evia. DW's Barbara Basil, thank you very much to you both. Well, the wildfires tearing along the Mediterranean coast are just some of the blazes burning around the globe. NASA and the European Space Agency have released satellite photos now showing just how widespread forest fires are right now. Fire zones are indicated in red, as well as near-record flames in California. This image shows heavy wildfires in South America and Africa. You can just make it out there that also ablaze parts of the Middle East and even northern Europe and Asia, right up to the Arctic Circle. So satellites have also picked up details like smoke trails from the fires in Turkey spreading across the Mediterranean. It's a warning from space. The planet is burning faster than many of us realize. Well, joining me now to talk about the science behind these fires is Dr. Clement Abergele. He's from climate application. He's a climate application scientist from the European Space Agency. Dr. Abergele, thank you very much for being with us. What sort of message should governments be getting from the evidence that you and your colleagues are delivering about extreme weather events and climate change?
Well, thank you very much. The IPCC has released earlier this week on Monday the key finding of the Working Group 1 contribution to the 6th assessment report of the physical science basis of climate change. What we have learned is that climate change is happening here and now and is linked to human activities or our consumption of fossil fuels. As you said, satellites such as those operated by the European Space Agency in partnership with the European Commission and under the Copernicus program, permit to monitor different fire characteristics. And this fits the IPCC evaluation and explain our changing climate. The reports provide estimates of the chances of crossing the global warming level of 1.5 degrees in the next decades and find that unless there are immediate, rapid and large-scale reduction in greenhouse gas emission, limiting warming to close to 1.5 degree or even 2 degree will be beyond reach. Okay. Moving forward, those efforts to combat climate change and to deal with these extreme events, we need a rapid and large-scale reduction in carbon dioxide emission and other greenhouse gas emission and reach carbon neutrality as early as possible.
Right. Now, you study moisture in the soil and vegetation, I understand. We're looking at many fires right now burning. What have you learned that can help us prevent the kinds of wildfires that we're seeing right now?
That's right. With all those satellite data, we can monitor different fire characteristics. Areas that are dry and prone to wildfire outbreak, actively flaming and smoldering fires, burned area, as well as smoke and trace gas emission. We can learn from this vast amount of data we have collected over the year. And the first step is to acknowledge the risk. Under a warming climate, extreme events such as prolonged heat wave and drought are going to increase both in intensity and frequency. This is a proven fact. And perhaps we need to address regulations on homes built in fire-prone areas. We can also use prescribed fire in period of the year where the risk of fire is lower to screw away excess vegetation that can fuel runaway blazes in forest and grassland during summer, during higher risk area. And we also need to raise awareness of this higher risk of wildfire outbreak in our changing world.
Now, you mentioned in your first answer there about the IPCC report on global warming. It's now, that humans are making this happen is considered now indisputable as a fact. You said that changes need to be made in CO2 emissions, rapid reductions, deep reductions. Do you think that will happen in time to prevent the sort of tipping point that you've described?
I think we definitely need to go toward that. We need to implement those decarbonization strategies in line with the Paris Agreement on climate, and you've mentioned it, through real business changes and innovations, including efficiency improvement, renewable energy. Coming back to the IPCC, many of the changes observed in the climate are unprecedented, and some of the changes already set in motion, such as continued sea level rise, are irreversible over hundreds of thousands of years. However, strong and sustained reduction in emission of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases would limit climate change. While some benefits, for example, for air quality will come rather quickly, it could take up to 20 to 30 years to see global average temperatures stabilize.
So mitigation and adaptation. Dr. Clement Abergel from the European Space Agency, thank you very much for being with us today on DW News.
We're in a burned forest a few kilometers outside of Athens, and with me is Costa from the World Wildlife Fund. What are we seeing here actually? This tree is still burning even though the flames have been largely extinguished.
Yeah. You are seeing a tree burning, and on the side, on the background, you'll see a lot of smoke coming out from the roots. The roots in the trees will be burning for weeks actually. So it takes constant monitoring, and the fire brigade will be intervening all the time to take this fire down.
Now, the Prime Minister has said he would replant all these forests. This is 150,000 acres of forests around Athens that have been burned here. Is that even possible, or is that an empty promise?
This is what we always hear, but most of the forests will not need replanting actually, because this is the Mediterranean. Forests are adapted to fire, so most of it will be regenerated naturally, as long as we make sure it does not go away. So if we start having houses popping out, or farming popping out, or things like that, we've seen all around the Greece, and this is one of the reasons you have a lot of arsons all around the Med actually, not only in Greece. Then we will lose the forest. If we protect the forest and keep it, nature will do it. It will gradually do its job.
But it takes a long time.
But it will take a long time. This is a pine forest, so it will take a good 15 to 20 years before it's back in that shape again.
So Athens has really lost a lot by losing these forests, because this more or less was the green lung of the Greek capital, wasn't it?
Yes, this was the green land that remained. Athens used to have in the past decades quite a lot of forests around it, but we've gradually lost it from Pentelia and Hymettus, and a large fire in Parnitha about 15 years ago. So yeah, this is one of the remaining lungs we're losing today.
What can be done for prevention? We watched the firefighting efforts. They seemed haphazard at best, if to put it mildly. So really, what needs to be done? I mean, the fires need to be prevented, not only fought afterwards.
Exactly, fires need to be prevented. What we always say is, when you need to extinguish a fire, it's already too late. Fires need to be prevented and not extinguished. And what we see in Greece and what we see in all the Mediterranean countries during the past decades is a loss of knowledge, a loss of interest in prevention. Prevention is a very scientific approach. It does not show off, so politicians don't get the credit for it. And you usually don't see it, because if it's good, then you don't see the results, because you don't see the fires. So people are not investing in prevention. They rather invest in planes, or they rather invest in fancy fire machines. All of these are useful, but all of these are additional to prevention, because what we see is that once a fire reaches a certain size, and especially under climate change and with the temperatures we're having and with the winds we're having, then it's almost impossible to extinguish. And 200 kilometers north from here in Evia, we're getting a huge fire that we cannot control exactly for that reason. So prevention is the key, and most of the investment the countries, Greece, the countries of the Med, the European Union is doing for forest protection should go in the prevention side.
Kosso, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, thank you.
Meanwhile, Algeria's president said dozens of soldiers died saving residents from wildfires in that country's forested Kabylie region. State TV says at least 65 people have been killed in the blazes so far. Scorching temperatures and severe water shortages have made it difficult for crews to fight the fires. Officials say arsonists may be to blame. 3 days of national mourning have been declared.